Shalom. I hope you all had a nice Shavuot. Something very interesting. After Har Sinai, the great revelation, Hashem's divine presence resting on the Har, the Pasuk tells us, Bimshoch HaYovel Hema Yalu Bahar. After the whole episode of the giving of the Torah, the people were now allowed to go up on the mountain. The question is, surely, if the mountain had become holy, we know that something that has become holy, the Kedusha, the holiness, does not just disintegrate, evaporate. The holiness needs to be either redeemed or it will stay there. How on earth were the people allowed to go up on the mountain? What happened to this holiness? What happened to the Kedusha that came and transcended on the mountain for the Matan Torah? Explains the Meshech Chochmah a very interesting concept. Because this Kedusha that came down onto the mountain was a Kedusha that was divinely given. It was not brought about through a person's actions. It was not brought about through a person exerting effort, doing something, making tefillin, writing a Sefer Torah, writing a mezuzah. Therefore, it was just a divine present given to the mountain for the duration of the giving of the Torah. Therefore, something that was not worked at, something that was not brought about by a person's own effort, the Kedusha doesn't stay. There's no continuation. A person, it may be that it was Kadosh for that period of time, but the Kedusha will not reside continually. Hence, the Jewish people are allowed to go up on the mountain. A similar concept we find that we know that on Shabbat we have a Neshama Yetira. We have an extra soul that is given to us for the Shabbat. This extra soul, when it leaves us on Motzei Shabbat, it's a decline. Therefore, we are instructed by Chazal to take the besamim, to take some nice herbs, smelling herbs which the Neshama enjoys, and that enables a person to let the nice taste of the Neshama Yetira linger on. Now there's an argument in the Rishonim if there's a Neshama Yetira on Yom Tov. It would seem to be, if there is a Neshama Yetira, then we would need to have Besamim when we make Havdalah on Yom Tov. If there's no Neshama Yetira, then we don't have Besamim when we make the Havdalah after Yom Tov. As we know, we don't use the Besamim, we just use the wine. As most likely we are of the opinion that there's no Neshama Yetira given on Yom Tov. However, there is an opinion of the Rambam that learns that really on Yom Tov there is a Neshama Yetira. However, even though there's a Neshama Yetira, you still don't need the Besamim on Motzei Shabbat. The reason being, there's a difference between the Neshama Yetira of Yom Tov to that of Shabbat. Albeit maybe the same Neshama Yetira. However, the Neshama Yetira that comes about and is given to a person for Shabbat, that is automatically divinely implanted into the person every seventh day of the year. Shabbat comes along and it's automatically coming along. Ata Kidashta, Hashem made it holy, and the person is given a Neshama Yetira. However, the determining of a Yom Tov is dependent upon the Bet Din fixing the luach, fixing the calendar. When's Pesach going to be? Are there going to be 30 days to the previous month? Are there going to be 29 days? Therefore, when's Rosh Chodesh going to fall? Due to the fact that the fixing of the Yom Tov is in the hands of Bet Din, it's in our hands. We have to work, we control it. We decide. Therefore, due to us having put in the effort to work out when Yom Tov is, we have a Neshama Yetira, but we don't need the Besamim because it doesn't leave us. that neshama yetira will linger on with us after Yom Tov, unlike Shabbat, because we put in the effort to bring it upon us. On a similar note, in our parasha, we find a very interesting concept. We know that there's a Torah commands the parasha of a Nazir. Nazir is a person that accepts upon himself a higher, more spiritual way of life, separating himself from wine, cutting his hair. And there's halachot given about a Nazir. He's not allowed to contaminate himself to any people. He's not allowed to come into contact with any dead people. And even more, we find that a Nazir is even more strict than a Kohen. A Kohen is allowed to contaminate himself to his 7 close relations, wife, parents, sisters, brothers, whereas a Nazir is not allowed to contaminate himself to anybody. Surely a Kohen serving in the Bet HaMikdash is on a higher spiritual plane than a Nazir. Explains the chinuch in Mitzvah Shinai and Vav. No, a Kohen is born into it. He is a Kohen because his father's a Kohen. He's naturally a line, hereditary, passed on, that he is a Kohen because it's in the family. Therefore, although he may be working the Bet HaMikdash, he comes to the Bet HaMikdash, he works in the Bet HaMikdash, and he may, after leaving his work, go home, enjoy his social life. It's not necessarily that he's picked a higher spiritual lifestyle for himself. He's accepted upon himself the role of being born into the family kahuna. Therefore, it'd be unfair of the Torah not to let him contaminate himself to his close ones, because he enjoys a social life with them, he has time with them. Therefore, the Torah does not deprive him of that ability to contaminate himself to his close relations. However, the Nazir, on his own accord, without anyone pushing him, he's taken upon himself a higher level. He's taken upon himself to exert, to elevate, to become more spiritual, to become a person that what interests him are less mundane, physical concepts. What interests him is more the concept of being closer to Hashem, gaining more spiritual values. Therefore, for him, the Torah does not deem necessary for him to be able to contaminate himself to his close relations, because that's not what interests him. When he takes on this higher level in life, what he's interested is in sitting, learning Torah, being more connected to Hashem, more spiritual values, ethics, morals, and that's what interests him. It's not a contradiction to Darchei Noam V'chol Netivotei Shalom if this Nazir is not allowed to contaminate himself. Because he's taken it upon himself, he's acquired it for himself, these spiritual values, that's what interests him. We see from here that a person that wants, on his own accord, and exerts effort, and applies himself to grow, to be more committed, to climb, these spiritual acquisitions are his. Nobody can take them away from him. They are not superimposed, as was in Har Sinai. They are not something that's just been given as a present. They're something that's been earned through work and effort and tirelessly getting yourself there. When a person does that, these levels of spirituality will not leave you very fast. Shabbat Shalom.